You're watching the Pen Amazing show, and I'm your host, Diana. Today we'll be talking to John Wilson and Nicolas Power.
My name is John Wilson. I live in Toronto, and I am working as a volunteer for the Pan Am Path project, which is part of the Pan Am Games initiative for the City of Toronto, which is coming in July and August this year.
And I'm Nicolas Power. I'm a poet living here in Toronto, and I'm working at it almost every day. And I've worked with a group of poets who did a walk along the Don as part of a Lost Rivers walk. And we've joined as a group with the Pan Am Path Committee, and we'll be doing a walk along the Don River as part of that event.
Would you explain more about your role with the Pan Am Games?
I've decided that it would be great to volunteer for the Pan Am Games. The Pan Am Games is just a really great opportunity for the city to kind of shine. And I'm really quite passionate about the beauty of nature in our city. I think the city it's one of the best parts of our city. So I've gotten an opportunity to volunteer and help people to find their way to some of our beautiful natural locations. And that's where the Pan Am Path is running. So when they come to the city for the Pan Am Games, they can also come and see the beauty of our city.
So, John, you would say that you initiated the idea for this project.
A lot of people have been involved in the project. The idea to have a poetry read on the Pan Am Path, that's really, I think, was my idea. The Pan Am Path is a bigger project than me. Of course, the Pan Am Games themselves are even bigger than that. I met Nicolas on the Lost River walk that he mentioned. And so we became involved together on that poetry walk, and then we said, let's do that again.
I was quite interested in the fact that the Pan Am Games committee was reaching out to cultural groups to be involved with the Pan Am Games. So it was on my mind, like, oh, this would be great to be involved in some way. And then since we already had this project going and John made the connection with the committee, I was glad to be part of it.
A lot of people wouldn't say there's a connection between sports and poetry. How did you find the connection?
Well, you know, with poetry, they say you should write about what you know. And certainly a big part of my life growing up has been sports. So it can become your subject matter. But also, I think specifically because the Pan Am Games are really trying to connect with the city of Toronto and welcome visitors. The notion of walking, which is really the big exercise that I do now, that would be my sport, I guess, at this point. It's really great to combine both poetry and walking, and especially in nature, as John's saying. You know, there's really some wonderful places in Toronto.
I just think that this is another part of our city. Both of us have spent a lot of time walking our ravines and walking the trails. And I just think that our city really puts its best foot forward when you can see how green it is.
Speaking of green, do you think the games will have any impact on the environment?
Well, that's a good question. I really like the care that the city's taking in thinking of the bigger picture as they're building for the games. So there's the urban environment. Part of the balance that we're trying to draw attention to is these natural places, and also reclaiming places like the Don River where they could be more beautiful. You know, maybe the canoe races could be happening on the Don instead of, you know, somewhere else, you know, I mean, wouldn't that be great, you know?
I think, you know, I mean, there's obviously, if people travel, they have to burn gasoline, and that creates emissions. And so there's one perspective. If you looked at the games, you'd say, well, you know, that's not good for the environment. But again, at the same time, I think that people, you know, training, becoming healthy, working hard at their physical activity also brings you in touch with nature. A lot of times you go out running, or the activities themselves are in nature. And one of the biggest things to improve the environment, from my perspective, is just for people to fall in love with it and want to preserve it.
And you mentioned the Downriver. Maybe for those who don't know anything about it? Maybe you could explain what the connection of the Downriver with the walk is.
To begin with, my own interest came about through what John's involved with the lost rivers. And as a poet, you're always looking for something that's sort of slightly hidden or maybe even secretive or not always visible to people. And so the notion of the buried rivers and the lost rivers of Toronto really interests me. It's like the unconscious of the city, you know, kind of background knowledge. So, but the Don itself is something that was straightened out about 100 years ago or more, and it changed the whole geography of the lower Don River. And so our walk highlights the history of that, the changes that went on where parts of the river were left behind, like at the foot of Riverdale Park, where there's some ponds that used to be part of the river, and the changes in the way flooding has occurred, even just in a couple of years ago, the kind of flooding that occurred because of the channelizing of the river. These are really strong images, not just for poetry, but for people to understand how geography can be affected by these kinds of things. So that's the sort of connection I have. And the walks that we did draw attention to where the old river was, the width of the river before, and people can get some of that understanding along with the poetry about the beauty of the river.
What opportunities the games will create to rediscover the beauty of the city?
The biggest thing is just so many people coming here, so many people being across the city, and I think that the biggest opportunity is just all the people of the city who are volunteering to go and help guide people around the games, or just all of the volunteering assistance that they'll give. We can be great ambassadors for people to realize, you know, I mean, obviously a big part of the beauty of the city is the people who live here. And so just being there to welcome people to our city, and then just sharing your own impressions of what the city is to you. For me, that involves the ravines and the trails and the natural elements. But then for other people, it can just involve entertainment. It can involve culture and cultural events, and all of these things are part of the beauty of our city.
Our small walk, along the Don is part of this epic path, really, across the Pan Am path across Toronto. Starts in northwestern part of Toronto in Rexdale and goes all the way down through to along the front of the city. The Martin Goodman Trail along right downtown, and then back up the Don River and right out to Pickering from
through Scarborough.
Through Scarborough, that in itself. I mean, if people walked any part of that path, they'd really get in touch with the natural beauty of the city, because there are existing trails that are already established for people to experience nature.
So would you say that the Pan Am path is a tourist attraction?
I think it's a great idea and a great tourist attraction. It's the sort of thing I like to do when I go to cities.
That's right.
And I know that there are others. When I go onto the trail now, certainly along the Martin Goodman Trail, along the waterfront, you see people from all parts of the city, and frequently from other places as well. I think the great idea about the Pan Am Path is to take bits of trail here, there, and elsewhere through the city and link them together, and then kind of put a brand on that around the Pan Am Games, and say, this is something where we're connecting the city together, and we're bringing people to the city to link with us together. So I think that it can be a really great tourist attraction. I think there are interesting things to visit. There's Todmorden Mills, there's the Evergreen Brickworks, there's the Distillery District, there's Old Fort York, High Park. All of these places are along the Pan Am Path, and great places for people to come and learn about our city.
Would you tell us more about the activities you're planning?
Yes, well, we're starting at the top of Riverdale Park on the west side of the Don River. The east side.
Yeah.
The east side of the Don River at Broadview and Langley. And we walk down to the river, and there's a footbridge over the Don River. And we go into the foot of Riverdale Park. And so at different sites along the way, we'll read poems that are appropriate to those places and to the history of those particular places. It'll be kind of a looping walk in that part of the Don River.
Is this going to take place in one day?
The plan is on July 4th, which is a Saturday. That's when we'll be doing our animation of the Pan Am Path in the Lower Don River section. And our event is going to start at 11 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, July the 4th. We'll be at the intersection of Broadview Avenue and Langley, which is a street, 3 streets north of Gerrard, so Broadview and Gerrard vicinity. And that's where our part of it will start. And then through the day, there will be other events that you can go on to at other places, Todmorden Mills, Evergreen Brickworks, and the paths in between for animation of the path. And I hope there's going to be some really exciting surprises along the way.
Finally, would you tell us something more about the poetry you'll be reading during the walk?
Well, there's 5 poets at least. There may be some others joining us, and I'm reading 2 that are shaped in the shape of a river. So, and I'd be glad to read some of those for you. And several of them have historical backgrounds. And there's even one that references Rob Ford bobblehead dolls that were found in the vicinity and graffiti underneath the Dundas Street Bridge. So there's a lot of local references there.
And before we wrap up, I'm going to ask Nicolas to read one of his poems.
Well, thanks, Deanna. This is called Dreaming of Trees. Walking at night in the woods between my childhood home and the river, fully awake and wondering in a dream both strange and familiar. Particular trees reach out like lovers, breathing in their distinct rhythms, rough skins pulsating with heat, colors of their chemicals glowing with rich greens and deep blues, druidic mysteries and radio waves. I am drawn by their yearning, their knowing, and their intimacy. A filament sprouts from my hip to the nearest tree, shimmering, transparent, trembling with desire. I am rooted to the ground. Thank you.
Well, Nicolas, that was amazing. It was very beautiful. And thank you both for joining us today. And thank you for watching Pan Am Amazing TV.